Well, I hope you've enjoyed that. Welcome back again. Robert, before we took a break, we were just talking about, I suppose, taking responsibility for your pet.
Yeah.
And some of these youngsters these days, especially getting or acquiring, is a bull terrier. I'm not very good with dogs, you know. The ones I like are the Labrador, you know. Those ones I like.
I wouldn't recommend one.
No, you won't recommend one? No, you're talking from experience. That's it. That's off my list then. So we're just talking about, there's a lot of responsibilities. People have to take ownership of their dog behavior. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. And there's a real kind of, as I say, an ethos at the moment about getting dogs as fashion statements. Yeah. But people just aren't really taking on board what's responsible, you know. So that puppy's going to need to go out maybe 4 or 5 times a day. There's lots of things that come out of various points in it that people don't want to get involved with, but somebody's got to clean all that up. Diet, exercise, all those sort of things that people really have to take on board. And just the cost of owning a dog. The cost of buying one, if you want to buy a pedigree dog nowadays, is several £100s. You've then got to insure them because vet fees are so expensive. And people really don't think all these things through. They just think, I want to get a staff, or I want to get a pit bull, or I want to get a... and they don't really think about the long-term implications. So part of what I do is to try and hopefully get in right at ground level, either before they've got their dog or maybe just after, and say, okay, these are the things that you're going to need to think about down the line. If you don't prepare for that, you're not going to keep this dog.
I mean, you wrote a book as well called, is it Trouble-Free Dog?
That's right, yes.
But that was published when, 2000?
It was published originally in 2000, and then it was reprinted and revised last year.
Oh, okay. I know, it's a shame we didn't have the book. Should we,
I know, I forgot to bring it.
I forgot to bring the book out. And now it's like, oh my gosh, I really want to see. So what is the book all about? Is it just all your experiences and how people can train dogs, and that you've kind of composed or compiled into this book? Well,
one of the difficulties for pet owners is now there is just such a deluge of literature available, and people just don't know right from wrong. Every behaviourist has a different view, so does every trainer. There's a saying that if you put 3 dog trainers in a room, the only thing they'll agree on is the other 2 are rubbish. So the poor pet owner has no idea what's good information from bad information. And I've got hundreds and hundreds of books, and as I read through them all, I just realised it was horribly confusing. So I wanted to write just a simple, straightforward book that tells it as it is, from the day you start thinking about getting a puppy to your dog in old age, and how to manage that and how to avoid problems occurring rather than how to deal with them later. So it's mostly about how to prevent problems occurring, but then I give lots of examples of dogs that I've encountered and problems that I've encountered and how I fixed them, so that the reader hopefully can follow that process right through, do the same with their dog, and not have to deal with it again later on. A colleague of mine who's considered a world leader in behaviour, he actually wrote the foreword for it, and he said it was the first book he'd ever read that actually made him think that a book was useful to a pet owner, because he said it was written the way the dog would probably have written it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I like to think it helps the owner see the problem from the dog's perspective, and then look at a better way of managing it, so they don't end up having to get rid of the dog.
Okay. I mean, do you need a qualification to be a canine behavioural trainer?
No, this is a thing that I find really worrying. Rhoda, you could do it tomorrow.
Really?
Absolutely.
Is there any money in it, though?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. People
are we talking about
lot
six figures? Or?
I know people who've become multi-millionaires based on dogs.
Really?
There is a lot of money to be made. But the reality is anybody can do it. There is no regulation of dog trainers or behaviourists. So quite literally, you could decide tomorrow you wanted to change your career. You could go home, print out some flyers, and advertise yourself as a dog behaviourist. There's nothing that says that you can't. So what I'm finding is, I was only talking to a colleague of mine who is an average dog trainer at best. And suddenly I saw that she was advertising herself as a behaviourist. Now I know she's never studied behaviour at all. So I contacted her and said, I've always known you to criticise behaviourists, and now suddenly I see that you are one. What's happening there? And she said, well, I just realised I could charge 3 times as much for being a behaviourist as I could have when I was a dog trainer. So she's now promoting herself as a behaviourist with no behavioural training whatsoever, and making 3 times as much money.
But that can be good for the dog, though.
Well, it's a disaster, because she wasn't even a very good dog trainer. But she's now promoting herself as this behaviourist and going into people's homes and giving them absolutely terrible advice that's doomed to failure. But of course, by the time the owner realises that, it's already too late, they've paid her. But some of the advice that she gives is actually quite dangerous, and if the owner's followed it through, you know, some of those dogs will end up much worse rather than better. So yeah, people really need to kind of research where they're getting their behaviourist from. There are some reputable organisations. There's the UK Registry of Canine Behaviourists,
which you're a member,
of which I'm a member.
Yeah.
Which every member has to follow a code of practice and a code of ethics, and they're answerable if they don't. There's the Association of Pet Behaviour Counsellors, and again, they have a very strict code of practice. And really, people should be looking to one of those organisations.
And how can they, is there a website for this?
Yeah, they can go on to www.ukrcb.org, O-R-G, or www.apbc.co.uk. And then they look for a member that's in their local area. But I would be very, very wary of using anyone who isn't a member of one of those two organisations. But
how do you vet them, though? How does the organisation, I mean, what makes you any better?
Yeah, well, what happens with the organisation is that people usually join as a student or probationary member, and they are monitored through sometimes years before they can become a full member. And we monitor all of their work. We'll go out and observe their consultations, see how they train, and only if we decide we're happy with that do they become members. Having become members, they're monitored throughout that. We continue to assess their work. We can spontaneously turn up at any of their training classes or consultations and observe what they're doing. And if we're not happy, we'll revoke membership. So that's why, although we've been running for, I don't know, something like 20 years now, probably plus now, we've only got something like about 40 or 50 members.
Really?
We're that rigid about who gets in, yeah.
But how different to you, I mean, this is just from our own ignorance, really. How different are you or the UK...
UKRCB.
Yeah, compared to the RSPCA, I mean...
Okay, well, the RSPCA are a charity that was set up purely to deal with cruelty cases, and that's what they do.
Okay.
They'll also deal with injured wildlife, but they don't offer any sort of training or behavioural facility at all. Okay. They would refer you to somebody else. But as I say, because everybody or anybody could do dog training or run classes or set up behaviour consultations and so on, it really does pay the end. I'm not exaggerating. I've known of dogs who've been destroyed through going to the wrong dog trainer.
No.
Absolutely, who've gone to the wrong training class or the wrong behaviourist and have ended up destroyed as a result of the advice that they were given. But as I say, often by the time the owner realises that, it's already too late. There are some, you know, very dodgy organisations. There are some franchises that run out there. There's one that I know that runs a week training course. So you could go there knowing nothing about dogs. You do a week's training and you are now a behavioural trainer.
Really?
Absolutely.
And I could charge £300 just like that?
They charge more than £300. Some of the methods they use, there's one that they use called the helicopter method that literally involves swinging the dog around over your head on a chain lead.
But that is cruelty.
Dogs have had their larynxes damaged. I've known of dogs that are passed out using this technique, and you may then decide this is not okay, but your dog is already traumatised, maybe injured, and it's very difficult for you to then get recompense. So it's really worth investigating before you pick somebody. Oh,
that is an awful thing, because I love animals, and I know I don't have pets just because I can't look after myself. And I just think that if I'm going to have an animal, I need to be able to look after the animal. Because one of the things as well, that coming up to the Christmas season, everybody always have dogs, so you always have this advert saying,
a dog is for life,
not for Christmas. Yeah. So, I mean, how can people change? I suppose we have to change the mind. It's so easy to say to people, a dog is for life, not for Christmas. What do they need to do?
Well, I think it's time to change slogans like that because, as you say, people are so kind of desensitised to it. It doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
And thousands of people will still go out and get an animal for Christmas.
Yeah.
It's really about trying to educate people to really stop and think. Every child who says they want an animal, the animal will become the parent's animal because children aren't responsible enough to long-term take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
So parents should never get a pet for their child. They should only get a pet if they, as parents, want a pet.
Yeah.
Because it will become their responsibility. And what often happens is the child promises them the world, I'll look after it, I'll feed it, I'll clean it out, I'll get it. They're not going to do that, not long term. So the parent has to decide first of all, do I want a cat or a dog or whatever animal it is? If you look at rabbits, for example, the most common killer of pet rabbits is starvation.
Really?
It's starvation, yeah, because most kids want to get a rabbit, the parent gets them the rabbit, it gets forgotten in the hutch, you know. At first they're out there every day fussing it and cleaning it out. But over time, they forget all about it. And then what happens is everybody realises the rabbit's been very quiet, and they go in and there's this like skeleton there, and everybody forgot to maintain it. So it's a very good idea at first, you know, but who's going to look after it long term? If the parents aren't prepared to take responsibility for it and oversee it, chances are the animal is going to suffer. And most adults don't want to take responsibility for the child's pet. So think very carefully about whether or not you're going to get one in the first place, and really do, you know.
Okay. I mean, we didn't talk about the school. What, do you have a website, or do you have, what is the training business you run? What is it called?
Yeah, my business is called the Dog Owners Club.
Okay.
I have a website which is www.thedogowner's thedogownersclub.co.uk.
Yeah.
People can log on to that and get lots of information. There's training tips and things on there as well, things to think about. There's bits from the book and how to look for a good dog trainer or behaviourist, things that you should look at before you appoint them and so on. And obviously all my contact details as well in case people contact me. There's photographs and things from the show and all sorts of other things that people can look at too.
That is brilliant, Robert. We've come up to the end of our interview.
Already?
Already. I mean, we're just going so fast. I could be here all day, you know. Robert, thank you very much for being on the Rhoda Wilson Show. We've enjoyed having you here on the sofa.
Thank you
and
very much.
I hope and I wish you all the best, and
Thank
I hope all goes well. This is me, Rhoda Wilson, saying thank you very much indeed for watching. Until next week when I have another interesting guest, goodbye.